or you're not. That's just art in the background, so get used to it. Welcome to the Science and Art Café on Data to Effect. My name is Rutger Middendorp. I'm a freelance journalist. I write about tech. I'm also a lecturer at the Academy for Pop Culture about concept development. But tonight I'm your host, guiding you through this evening. We have a scientist, Dr. Karsten Schulz, which a lot of you know, I heard, and the artist duo Arvustin Caram. I actually practiced this. Arvustin Caramdersson. Yes, I'm saying that right? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Cool. And they will be bouncing ideas and insights from their unique perspectives on emerging technologies tonight. You will probably hear more buzzwords tonight that you can manage, like machine learning, blockchain, interconnected societies. With a scientist and artist at the table, you will go home more informed and more confused. We can guarantee you that. Our speakers tonight are Karsten Schulz, an assistant professor of political science at the University of Groningen, here at the Campus Fryslân. He holds a doctorate from the University of Bonn, Center for Development Research. His current research at Campus Fryslân explores the links between climate action and sustainable development, and the governance of emerging technologies such as blockchain and distributed ledger-based systems. Then we have Hannes Andersson to the left of him. We can have a little applause for Karsten, right? Came all the way here in the rain like you all did. Then we have Agustín Martinez Caram. Hannes. Hannes Andersson is an artist, researcher, and general multimedia practitioner specialized in most things related to the field of audiovisual. That's why we got the beamer lined up so perfectly. He uses critical poetics and applied science fiction in order to explore narrative effects. Are you still all with me? And interrogate the ins and outs of the multiverse. He did his MA in Media Art Design and Technology at the Frank Moor Institute in Groningen, after having studied digital filmmaking and animation in Barcelona. And a little applause for Hannes as well. And last but not least, Agustín Martinez Caram is an Argentinian multimedia transdisciplinary artist. Like, how do you put that on your card? Like in 2 lines? It's a very long card. He holds a BA in English Literature and Linguistics from the University of Leipzig, and a Master's in Fine Arts in Art Design and Technology, also at the Frank Moor Institute in Groningen, so you can probably guess where they have met. With a focus on performative practice and audiovisual arts. His projects are concerned with the implications of an algorithm-based world and the way they may reconfigure our understandings of ourselves and reality. That's what we're basically going to talk about tonight. The timeline for tonight: first, every speaker has 10 minutes to himself on his own subject, and then we will have a panel discussion about human-machine relations, the question of control, who controls what's actually going on in this discipline, and the enchantment of technology, and in the end we will have a Q&A. Each part takes about 30 minutes. Yeah? So let's get to it. Karsten, will you kick us off?
Sure. So thank you very much for the nice introduction. I would also like to thank the Media Arts Festival for making this possible, and for all of the people who have been involved in organizing that from our side. Very, very big thank you. And I think it's great that we get the chance here to explore some of these topics. So as a start, let me maybe start with technology as such, because I'm sure many of you are not quite familiar with the background of what we're talking about today, artificial intelligence, etc. Like it was already mentioned in the introduction, a lot of buzzwords, but we want to get a bit to the core of it. And I hope we don't leave you more confused, but more enlightened partly also, and for sure more informed as citizens also, because our belief is that it's really important that we have a democratic debate about these new technologies, and we will talk about the reasons why that is the case. So most narratives, when we hear them in the media, in public debates, in arts, they have one thing in common if the future of humanity is concerned, and that is that they can't ignore technological innovation and its role in shaping futures. So topics such as artificial intelligence and machine learning or robotics, they are discussed in public, but I think not nearly enough to comprehend the full scale of the changes that we are currently experiencing. So let me maybe start talking a bit of what is AI. So in very basic terms, AI, or artificial intelligence, is a machinic process or system that tries to copy processes of human cognition, of brain processes, of processes of interpreting. For instance, we have applications in language recognition, we have applications in data analysis, and all of this is based also on the famous algorithms. So part of an artificial intelligence system would be algorithms. And these algorithms are basically a set of defined rules for how the machine comes to certain decisions. So this is basically, in very, very basic terms, what AI and algorithms are about. Now, what are the implications? So historically, AI has been developed since the late 90s, and some thinkers put it in 4 waves that reach until this very present day. And you could say it started a bit with internet AI. So that's your famous algorithm that would recommend music to you, for instance. So if you have Spotify or if you have Amazon and you browse for certain projects, the recommendations that you get based on your personal preferences, that would be a very basic application. Now, since about 2015, we are at the so-called 4th stage of artificial intelligence. And what does that mean? That means we are going towards an autonomous artificial intelligence. That means an artificial intelligence that is not dependent on humans and not fully programmed, but that's able to learn, and also to learn from previous generations of artificial intelligence. This means we are going to witness an exponential increase of machinic intelligence that is only potentially stopped by the limits of computational power and energy. If we think about new developments like quantum computing today, we can imagine where this will go in terms of the intelligence explosion, so to speak, that we're going to witness in the future. So overall, I would say technology has always been a part of human history and evolution. So if we think about our ancestors who used stone tools and wrapped themselves in animal skins to keep themselves warm, that was already technology. But of course, the technologies that we have today are very different. And the creation of new technologies such as algorithms or digital system connects us today, but also presents us with problems, questions, and ethical as well as regulatory choices. I'm myself a political scientist, so there is a big question about how we can deal with the potentials of AI, how we can regulate it, and what does it mean for us in our everyday life. One thing in all of these debates is pretty certain, and that is a philosophical question. So if we have this potential explosion of machinic intelligence, we are currently in a situation as a species where we have to comprehend the fact that we may no longer be at the center of our own rationality, because we have a machinic rationality that might outsmart humans exponentially. So it's a bit like this Copernican revolution, where we had a paradigm shift from the Ptolemaic model, so the Earth at the center of the universe, to a heliocentric model when we figured out, oh, it's the sun at the center of our solar system. And we could see this artificial intelligence as a bit of a similar situation, where human intelligence was the standard for intelligence for a long time, but now there's a phenomenon that might completely change that. And arguably, we may not experience a strong artificial intelligence or super intelligence anytime soon that could be compared to dystopian science fiction scenarios, like, let's say, the AI Skynet in the Terminator movies, or the machines in Matrix and so on. But we have at least 2 very fundamental challenges. And they are also related to security concerns. And the first one is if we have an AI that is able to learn autonomously, it's the danger that this technology could be weaponized. So we all could imagine small, very cheap drones that are, so to say, operated by an autonomous artificial intelligence system. And if now someone would get the idea of equipping those drones with biological agents like, let's say, the anthrax virus, and flying 300 of these drones into a territory, that is, in military terms, a new first strike capability. And if you think about technological innovation, you just need a small window of time of about 6 months. You can imagine this could even could create a lot of tension in the international security architecture. That is one point. So there's an AI arms race at the moment going on, where we have military applications. And the second one, I mentioned it already, is this exponential explosion of intelligence that we might experience in the future, or not, depending on how we deal with it, but it's very likely, because one of the basic rules of technological innovation is that if something can be done, it will be done by someone somewhere. So if we accept the fact that we might have to deal with it, then we should also think about this as a society. What does it mean for us? And illustrious individuals such as Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking have warned about the dangers of such a singularity or intelligence explosion. And I think it's very worthwhile to think about this today. These are my introductory terms. I hope I gave you a bit of a background about what we are talking today. There are many other issues and applications of AI. Some of them very beneficial. We could use it for detection of diseases. We could use it for sustainability issues to make our cities more resource efficient. But like I said, we could also imagine a whole gamut of dystopian scenarios. So we should, as a society, have, I think, an informed and democratic debate about what is happening there. But now I would like to pass on to my colleagues here. I don't know who of you wants to go next, but okay, Christine.
Hello everybody, hope you can hear me well. So I'll, after this introduction, I'll start a bit completely from a different, one of the very different applications of dealing with AI, which is arts. So I would like to share with you how I work with art and artificial intelligence. So I've been researching and working a lot in my practice with artificial intelligence in the last couple of years, and I'd like to tell you how I got there, what I've seen, and what I hope to keep learning about. So my background, as you heard from Budka, is a linguistic background. So I'm very interested in semantics. I'm very interested in the semantics of art. And one of the things then that I started thinking about was, how do I deal with the concept of intelligence? And for me, intelligence became this idea of a tool that we use for sense making, for making sense of the world and to navigate the world. And in a way, those are also the topics I was interested in art, because I found that art has this emotional sense-making attitude towards it, that it can be a very affective making also way of dealing with the world and our senses and how we interpret it. So I came to realize to myself that while the way to dealing with intelligence from a computational system is an engineering question, I felt that art had this very, I feel, important role to play in bringing to the conversation a view that's much more affective, that's much more emotional, because I do feel that we deal with the world in a very emotional way. So that's how I came to this affective idea of art and question. Before going a bit deeper into my work, I would like to mention a few people that I work with a lot and that are really inspiring. One of them, of course, is Hannes. We've worked a lot together, and we're preparing this exhibition that we're showing here in Luna as part of the Arts Festival. that will be at the Block High Sport. I will mention this at the end of the talk. You're of course all very invited to join it. And I guess that maybe we'll clarify, or we will have a personal experience maybe from what I'll be talking today and what we'll be talking. Of course, Karsten as well, I'd like to thank him a lot. We've had like very interesting conversations lately. I think a lot of you know him already very well. And I heard his talk and his ideas are super interesting and very motivational. And of course, Campus Fryslân and Luna for having us here. And everybody that makes it possible, they made us feel super welcome. So that I wanted to mention. To Rutger as well for introducing us, and actually to you as well, because the fact that you come here, I think, shows certain engagement, but I think it will come up a lot when we're talking our panel discussion, what we think is very important to have, which in the end is what we try to do with the art, get people engaged. So, when I was finishing my master's studies, where we met, I decided towards the end of my studies to get into the field of artificial intelligence. And the way I did this was a very interesting way, if I may say so, because I decided to write my thesis using artificial intelligence. So before doing my studies in literature, I got involved with this idea of generative art and code being called poetic. And I always thought that was really interesting, this idea that something so rigid, so computational, so mathematic could be considered poetic. The other road I took into this was through VJing. I used to VJ a lot in Berlin, and I got very interested in this showing live performance of stuff that was generated by a computer, and that always called my attention. This idea of agency, that the computer was playing such a strong part, and that the way it was doing something with me, that we were both kind of performing together for people. So I thought a very interesting way to research this was to make this book, which you see here. And I think it was kind of a statement. Some people thought it was a very interesting, brave statement. Other people thought it wasn't even a thesis. Most people would usually ask, you wrote it, the computer wrote it. So what it really helped me is that to create a stepping stone of analyzing this idea. Like I felt that in doing this, the AI was talking to me in a very weird way. Like I could read what it was saying, and then I could go deeper into that and find this kind of semantic meaning that in a way is the way I was sense making. So it was a very long book, and I decided also to present it as like a physical copy. I wanted to have this kind of dichotomy between this kind of tangible thing, this book as a door to knowledge, and this idea that we now have of the computer as an interface for all our knowledge. Further on, I've kept working and done different presentations in a more visual aspect. And I think hopefully this work shows a bit this idea of what you can do with AI to kind of generate an effective feeling. So, as you could read, this was all generated by the artificial intelligence, so nobody has really painted any of those frames you saw in this video still. And the question is, okay, how does this happen? A term that usually comes about when talking about artificial intelligence, and it's something we're also going to push, is the concept of the black box. So it's a computational term, which basically means this, that there's an input of information, there is a process of an internal behavior that nobody knows what's going on, and then there's an output. So basically, Yes, this is in a way you could claim as the eye of somebody else. You learned today. So this black box actually is really interesting because it's also maybe the space where an artist can investigate and go through. So it's a very powerful space, so I'll show this very quickly, because it can actually create images of people. So none of these people actually exist. This was developed in NVIDIA by a computer scientist called Goodfellow, and anybody using software and a bit of work can actually generate these images. So it's a very powerful tool, and that's in a way why we like it so much, and everybody keeps talking about it. There's a lot of artists then that have started to work with AI. The most famous cases are Refik Anadol, a Turkish artist. He worked a lot in Google, and he explores a bit more this idea of the latent space, this idea of the semantics within the black box. Another German artist, Mario Klingelmann, he works more in this more conceptual fine art idea of the piece, and he has this more fine art gallery approach where he finishes a piece and he wants to investigate a bit more this idea of agency in AI. Like, did he paint it? How did it come about? What's the serendipity that's happening when he creates a work? While this is all very nice, there's of course a few issues which you might have heard about as well, which is the question of bias. So I did this project that I'm working on at the moment. So what I did very quickly is I took one of these text generators that creates semantic text, so a story basically, and I gave it a text that it then auto-completes. Like, it takes the input of what it feels should go on and keeps on writing it. So I gave it my text, and then I changed only one thing. I changed the name of the character. And the name of the character in one of the stories, like one of the stories I kept writing next to each other, was Mahmoud. The character in the other story was Henry Smith. And as you can see very quickly, immediately the computer, when you start talking about Mahmoud, he thinks of festival, of gods, of a village. A doctor is one of the very few natives in the neighborhood. Suspicion and strangers in the village. While Henry Smith has white teeth and green eyes that shine out of the corner of his eyes. It's a very poetic phrase for computer if it's not Shakespeare. And then he says that he graduated at the Royal College of Physicians. He's a doctor. He has a science degree from the Royal College. And the story from then on keeps building. So in a way, the problem that we have in this black box is that the input that it's taken is many times related to the input the machines take from the entire world. And whether we like it or not, it already carries the biases that we have ourselves or that we've had around the world. So the question then is, how do we deal with that? Like, how can we, people talk about this a lot, like how can we take this into account when we start automating everything and leave the decisions to this very powerful tool. Finally then, I'll say very quickly, this is our project that we're presenting here at Luna as part of Media Art Fryslân Festival. It's called Illuminations. It takes place in the Blockhouse Court. And what we've done is we've worked very strongly and in collaboration with different institutions in collecting information from the Fries Filmarchiv, from the Leeuwarden Courant, so text, images, the Historical Center from Leeuwarden. So we've taken all these images and we've processed them in many different ways through artificial intelligence systems in ways of computer vision. How does a computer categorize the people? These are the photos of the prisoners in the Blockhouse Court, and the computer, as you can see, tags them as people, tags him wearing a tie. So the computer is looking at this, and we were like very interested in this idea of all this vast information that is very difficult to apprehend and work with. Suddenly, with these very powerful systems, you can do something about it. You can compress thousands of images and actually generate something that then we can again make sense of. So we've been working a lot on this idea, and we've worked a lot with the idea of locality as well, and tried to have this journey through the history and the city of Leeuwarden through the mind of the machine. And I hope you guys can make it, enjoy it. And I went a bit too long, but I hope you still like the talk. So thank you very much. And, yeah.
like one slide, because otherwise I get confused. So, hi, yes, I'm Hannes. I also want to thank everyone involved. I don't want to do it too long because it's been done already, but yeah, super thanks to everyone who's here. You know who you are. And you, of course. So, I wanted to talk a bit about just the concept of artificial intelligence, because so I'm an artist. I come from a cinema background. So I think in narrative structures, I think the world is made more of stories than of atoms. So I think especially more and more now with computational systems. So what we say the world is what it's becoming. So I think it's important how we talk about it. And if we consider just the term like artificial intelligence, it's like it's a projection into the future where we would have some sort of an artificial intelligence in the way that we kind of touched on now. What is intelligent? So, but if we consider it now, what we usually mean when we say artificial intelligence is it's not intelligent. Like it's autonomous algorithms that are not intelligent, and they are not artificial actually even. They are just reproductions of human behaviors that they're programmed. No? So even just defining it as an artificial intelligence becomes somehow faulty, I think, and it gives us this kind of dystopian view of it, and the wrong one somehow, because I think that we should maybe consider dystopian views of what it means to implement autonomous algorithms to handle our stuff. But I think it tends to kind of go by the side, because then we start thinking things like Terminator and robots taking over, drones coming here to kill us, and it's not really what's going on. Like I think that the problem is it's before, like we live in a world. I mean, humans are technological animals, and we have always relied on technology to drive our civilization forward. And this is a logarithmic curve, so this happens faster and faster. And we are now at something of a critical state, I think, where we are quite close to having almost everything automated. No? So like the way that the trains come and go and how they're reported, our internet banks and things, the way that the economy works, it's very much handled by autonomous algorithms. And I think we need to consider what these algorithms do, because they are not like some magical thing. They are not this artificial intelligence. They are very concrete things acting on our behalf. No? So we make them to make our life easy, and we write them, and we implement them, so we don't have to look up when the train is going to come, or remember the way to this location, or things like this. No? So, but this is starting to happen at such a scale that pretty soon we will have almost everything done for us by algorithms. And I think that before we end up there, we should kind of talk about what these algorithms are doing and why they are doing that, who makes them, and for what reason, and do they do what we want them to do. I'm not a technophobe at all. I'm actually quite utopian in my technological view. I think we need technology, and I think there's anyway no going back. But I think we need to kind of touch base with that technology, because I feel like now there is a very low literacy in the workings of technology. Like we rely very heavily on software, on hardware to do things for us, but we know very little of how this works. And I think that applies to all of us. I also think that applies to the people who develop the technologies, because you have this very compartmentalized knowledge. No? So you have a company that wants to do something, that wants to sell a product, maybe. They hire a developer to develop an algorithm that implements that algorithm, and then that plays out. No? And there's very little understanding of what actually happens. So we have sociologists and so looking at what's going on, but then they know very little about the actual workings of the algorithms. And then we have developers who develop algorithms, but they know very little of the social impact of these things. No? And I think that we all kind of need to get somehow in a space that we can talk about these things, because none of us, it's too complicated for us to know all of it. So we can only see a fragment of it, no? But we can all see a fragment of it. So I think that it's important to try to bridge and try to get a common ground where we can talk about what is happening actually with technology, and how does it work, and what does it do, and do we want that? Do we want it to do that? I'm not saying yes or no to that. I think we should ask that question as a species before we kind of dive into some dystopian or utopian kind of ideal of what we can do with it. And this is kind of how I generally choose to engage with technology. So I'm an artist, I work with technology, and the way I do that is I try to like personally, subjectively experience technology and see like how does it look like, what does it do, how does it act, and then I try to make that more, usually, and I try to enforce it and try to show that, no, to communicate that. And the reason I do this is partly to maybe illuminate some sort of underlying kind of maybe dangers or effects that technology has, but also to kind of generate a debate about it. But also for me to understand it, because I cannot really talk about it if I don't understand it. So if I can understand it, I can look at it better. I don't think anyone can really look at all of it now. I think that's it's too complicated. We're too many people, we have too much things going on. But I think it's important to consider, like, if we have ads in our basic communication, what does that do to us? Like, who makes these ads? And why do I see them? No, what does it do to me if I see them? And I think that is a point that I would like to touch on today. I think we will talk a bit more about it, of this, what is the control aspect of this, of a computerized society, of an autonomous technology, like what does that do? What is the implementations of having like intelligent software? And so I just kind of wanted to raise that point because I think it's my main concern around technology. So yeah, I think that's pretty much what I wanted to say. And yeah, we're gonna have a panel. Yeah. Okay, that's it.
Right. We're going to have a panel discussion in 3 parts, and the first is about the interaction that we as humans have with machines. So we're going to talk about ethical questions of technology, also how it has already changed the relationships that we have, the way that we look at the world and the world we live in. We have a small video to introduce the subject, so I hope I didn't put you on the spot too much by going on. Not really fast. Is your video mirrored? Cool. Wow. It's a nice background, as long as the music. So, to you guys, what is like the main thing you feel like in your daily lives that you feel has changed through these emerging technologies?
Everything.
can you give like a very prime example? Because I see him sort of being lost in the world with sort of in maps, being able to be everywhere else, but also not being at the place he's actually at. So what is something that sort of touches you when you see it happen?
So I think for me, the main concern is that not only that machines will become super intelligent and so on, we may be a bit further away from it, but they are already in some aspects much better at certain tasks than humans could ever be. And this has an impact in a lot of societal fields.
Can you give an example?
Yes. So for instance, big data analysis. If I have a lot of data that with pen and paper and with older computational technologies, I was not able to process. And I can do that very efficiently today on a large scale. That gives me access to knowledge about a lot of things. In the economy, for instance, we have high-speed trading now. In milliseconds we trade. We have other applications, such like health applications. We could use it for disease identification. We could use it for facial recognition, language recognition. So all these things are already there. And we're trying to form a bigger picture of what that does. But I think what it fundamentally changes is the way we socially interact and the way we perceive time and space. And
Yeah.
those are already quite fundamental changes to what it means to be a human being.
Yeah.
So now we could go into more detail about what that means with a lot of examples, but I think it touches on every aspect of society, up to politics. If I have a lot of data, so there was the Cambridge Analytica scandal recently. I don't know if you're aware of this, but it's basically the same principle that companies use with data analysis to sell you stuff, they now use for voter analysis, or they have done that. And that interferes with the democratic process. There is a number in the room that we now have up to 5,000 data points on every US citizen. So these algorithms, these machinic processes can be used to gain a much better and much deeper knowledge about the psychology of individuals and collectives.
Does it also mean that the person that has access to this technology can gain an advance in, for example, a political campaign that someone else can?
It can have a lot of different impact. I don't want to, deliver value judgment now.
Yeah.
I'm just saying there are lots of options.
Yeah.
And we've seen some concrete manifestations of what you can do with it, and it is highly problematic,
Yeah.
I think. And because there's also concentration of this knowledge in the tech sector. So we see this crystallization of expert knowledge, but without necessarily being linked to a reflexive social science or these kind of deliberations.
I also feel that it looks like right now, like tech companies sort of only now come to an understanding that they have an ethical obligation in this. Like just a small example, like with the screen time thing in your iPhone now, that they see we have started the epidemic, maybe we should do something about this. Do you recognize that?
I don't necessarily think that that's general. Like, I mean, when Google launched, they had as their tagline, their motto was "Don't be evil."
Yeah.
And then in 2015 they removed that, which I think maybe says something. Like what makes that choice that you go and say, no, we can no longer stand for this. Don't be evil.
Yeah.
We don't believe in it anymore as a company. And I think that because we talk about tech companies have a massive political power now, especially like Google. Like the word, yes, Google is to find out about something is to Google it. No, it's a huge amount of power we put there, and I'm not going to say that Google is this or that because we don't know what Google is, and this is, I think, it's a problem because we don't have any way of looking into Google. You can't contact Google. I tried to contact Google, it's impossible. You can only contact their marketing team. And
If you want to buy something.
if you want to buy ad space, you can contact, but then you call some summer working teenager. That's who you can contact. You cannot get in touch with Google. So Google is this very vague thing. What is Google? We know that it's a company. We know that it's in California, but but that's it pretty much. We know who the CEO is, but we don't know anything about the workings of Google. So even like
behind the wheel, that's what we basically.
yeah, exactly. And then like to me, it seems like from a political point of view, it's quite problematic to kind of to give the task of documenting reality and about communicate to a very anonymous entity who hasn't really declared at all what its objective is or so.
Yeah.
Like it's quite problematic, I think.
Because I think in principle we feel that technology is sort of technology has no political bias, or basically has no bias. But then if we look into how artificial intelligence works, I think you basically pointed on that. Bias is in the data that is used by artificial intelligence. So if there's bias in, there's bias out of the black box. That's basically what you were saying, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it's a big question about what we're saying. Like, do you find that it's okay that a company has to acknowledge themselves that they have a responsibility, or shouldn't they already have the responsibility? Like, if it's their choice to do so, isn't that maybe a problem? In the sense also, what Hannes was saying, what he was saying before, the knowledge of AI, for example, has become privatized. There's that many people studying in the field, and they all get offered very high salaries in different companies.
Yeah.
So all that knowledge leaves the universities and the public sector and starts working for these companies.
Yeah.
Who, as Hannes says, whose framework we don't understand, whose idea of morality we have to wait for them to choose.
Yeah.
And I think that's definitely problematic. And AI, in a way, has the risk of accelerating that.
Yeah.
Because it requires a lot of computational power, and it affects many different levels. In a way, what we're hinting at this video, which is another problem that AI has, is the issue of waste, electronic waste. Like in Uganda, there's this big waste dump, and here we have this interface, it's this cell phone that we're using, and we go through this very, tech, clean aesthetic of the media company, that has this very sleek appeal. And then you have all the kind of the other side of it, all the part that just gets destroyed, just taken away,
Yeah.
and we don't see that. The same way AI requires a lot of processing power, and this big processing power has an incredibly high environmental impact.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that it's terrible. There's a lot of things that are influencing the environment that shouldn't be stopped, but there's many questions in a way when it comes to technology. We always see kind of the product results that this companies talk to us.
I feel like there's black boxes on many levels, because the device is a black box, the artificial intelligence is a black box, the company that makes it is a black box, and basically the influence that they have on society is a black box as well.
But the question is then, is that bad? So humans are also to some extent a black box, so what's the difference, right? And neuroscience tells us we are far more emotional beings, although we like to think of ourselves as very rational, but that layer is not so thick.
Yeah.
But that is also a problem of how AI is used. So we need to unpack black boxes here, a lot of black boxes.
Yeah.
Human psychology, but also what the algorithm does. And there has been a study done, it has been published in Nature last year, about algorithmic bias in self-driving cars. So self-driving cars, the technology, Tesla works on it, a lot of other companies. I would say it's about 5 years away until we see anything that kind of works. But they had to make a lot of decisions there that are ethical in nature. For instance, if there is a perceived accident and the car has no way to escape that accident, it has to make a decision what to do. And that was basically the topic of the study. So what does the car do? And they did that study by asking a lot of people in different countries what their preferences would be. So someone crosses the road, should the car save the passenger and kill the pedestrian? Should it try to evade the collision and then risk the life of the passenger because it might go into a wall? So they asked people what would the preference be, what should the algorithm do? So it might to some extent even be healing to unpack that as a society, because we have to face the bias we normally don't face.
Yeah.
And so the decisions were really different in different cultures. For instance, it was found that in affluent and Western countries, people tend to prefer the option where the car kills people who violate traffic rules, meaning even if you're a child, the car will run you over. In other countries, there was a preference to save women and children, and so on. So we need to make these hard decisions because the machine has to make them, and we have to tell the algorithm basically, what should I do in this case? Because it's a hard set of rules, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, we normally don't face these biases if we talk about, let's say, I don't know, all kinds of racial discrimination, anti-Semitism, you name it, you know? We can talk about so many things, but normally it's not kind of faced head on, but that might be an opportunity to actually do that.
If it is actually told by the human what to do, instead of the bias you basically got in your book, which was based on data sets that are basically have a prejudice. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you have these issues as well that are the direct results of coding regarding skin color, for example. But then it has also to do with the ethnicity of workers in Silicon Valley. So there's a high majority of whites and Asian male workers there. So it wasn't taken into account, and
Yeah.
not because anybody had a bad intention with it, but it just wasn't part of the idea of the programmer dealing with that.
Yeah.
And the machine can't really decide that for itself, except
If the programmer doesn't know his own bias, then it will sort of flow into whatever he's making.
exactly.
Cool.
And I think, like in general, like as a demography, I think that developers are actually among the least like informed in terms of bias that of the group of people that I ever talked to. Like, which I think it comes back to then that I think we need to bridge the things. We need to unpack the black boxes, like because we have, like you say, that there is chains of black boxes, but it comes back to a literacy issue, I think, because we have. Like, okay, so we don't, Google as an entity, we don't know what is the agenda, but like we can see the code they're using. Like almost all the code that is being implemented by Google is actually online and available. Like we can't read it because we don't have literacy. Like some of us do, but most of us can't read it. And the same with like, I mean, you're a political scientist, you can analyze it from a political science point of view, and like I can analyze it from a critical media point of view, but like most developers don't have the literacy around societal issues to critically evaluate the code they're writing. So I think that is a point that is important here, that we need to kind of create spaces where developers can talk to political scientists, for example.
And also, I mean, we're dealing with complex systems, and anyone who deals with complex systems and the theory of them notes that they have so-called emergent properties. That means you cannot control a complex system. There might be things that are happening through the interactions that are emergent.
Yeah.
So a lot of these things we would also figure out in the process of implementing an algorithm, and then it runs.
Yeah.
And at some point something happens. For instance, with self-driving cars, this is why they're not on the road yet. A lot of components interact and suddenly the engine goes off. Nobody knows why. Normally there are safeguards, but if this happens in the wrong situation, even with 12 kilometers an hour, you can kill someone.
Yeah.
So we don't know simply what complex systems do. What we just put them on the road, or we just put them in practice sometimes, and then we're surprised if something happens. So it's also not only about literacy, it's also about what do complex systems do, because they're not controllable. There is no absolute control of them.
Yeah. Which is a beautiful bridge to our next segment. Thank you so much. Which is the question of control. So I think we touched a little bit on this as well, like who is behind the wheel of this change. So there's a lot of things that are influenced by, it looks a lot more nice. Take it away. There's a lot of things changing basically because of artificial intelligence. For example, there's a lot of like smart home products, for example, that is supposed to make your house more comfortable. But who basically decides that that is something that you want? So that is the thing that we are going to talk about after we click.
Atmospheric chemist Paul J. Crutzen has proposed the concept of the Anthropocene to characterize the contemporary geological era. It signifies the dominating geological force of human agency having the major impact on global ecology.
Free from prehistoric superstitions, the postmodern human is finally ready to step up and fully embrace her rightful place as creator and ruler of her own destiny, path and purpose.
Stating human agency as a dominating geological force inevitably brings us to the question, who is this human? Whose agency are we actually talking about? Which responsibility do I personally have?
Presented with this question, one easily feels caught in something like a metaphysical Morton's fork. It is, and somewhat leaking ship we suddenly find ourselves captains of, eroded and crackling in its Kantian core, torn by the rocks of the primitive finance.
The plastic island we have printed ourselves.
By ourselves is how we do in these times after Ford.
Kant's individual be headed by intentionalism.
Dead are the 31 true gods of the past, crucified in the name of connectivity.
Informationalism the religion of the elusive now. The sophisticated monkey takes the god matter in own hands as an hypocrisy takes the throne.
An engineering approach to the Great Mother, all knowing a simple matter of resource, of bandwidth, of server capacity.
Next stop, the singularity.
The human has made the network.
You can have it. On control.
Oh man, I'm getting so depressed.
Sorry.
It's awful.
We have to turn it around.
Yeah, we do, don't we?
Yeah, that's the point of the talk, I think.
Yeah.
Because we do need to turn it around.
Yeah, so, but I mean, it sort of feels like we've let the beast out. And do you feel are the options that we have to take control of this or have some control, as I'm saying this?
I'm one of these people who YouTube everything. So I also want to illuminate that side of it, because we do also live in a society where almost all information is available to almost anyone.
Yeah.
Which is like a huge uplift for humanity, actually. Like no matter what you want to do, you can always search for it. And how do I, no matter how do I build a fusion engine or how do I unplug my sink? It's like you have the information and you can get to it. Like how do I make a basket? Like you have it. And I think that is, I keep coming back to this with literacy, because I do we are not, it's easy to feel like we're victims in this whole thing, which goes back to Nietzsche in the end, no? Like we are swimming around in this technological society that we don't understand, but we actually do have all the means to do something, to take charge of it.
Because that makes it to me even more depressing. That we do have the means, but we're you see these little ants running around here as well, and you feel like we are these little ants, and we sort of get drawn to something that we would like right now, which we also know that doesn't benefit us in the long run, but we keep watching the Netflix, and it just we're like monkeys basically.
We are. Just with a bit better brain. But,
sophisticated monkeys.
Yeah,
Very
super monkeys. But I would say generally there are some perverse incentives in our economy that drive a lot of these processes, and we could start thinking there. So we have a phenomenon right now that is called the attention economy, and whether it's in politics or in economics, who screams the loudest, who has the most flashy, controversial content gets the attention, the clicks, and the ad revenues. We see it now with Facebook that opened basically the doors to media outlets like Breitbart News, where we all know that the fact-checking and the factual, if I can still use this word in today's world, factual content of the news that is there is at least questionable in a lot of cases. So we may think about these incentives, but they can generate a lot of money. So this is usually one incentive. And the other one is our personal agency. I think we all need to think about this. But we think about it in an economic context, in a societal context, and I think this we can just detox from our technology as a false choice. It's an illusion of a choice. Because if I want to participate fully in society today, I have no other option than using these technologies. Without Google Maps, without email, without all kind of digital applications, I'm basically out of the modern world. If I want to manage my family, if I want to run everyday errands, and I'm not even talking about smart homes now, I'm talking about very basic things. It's all digitalized. Yesterday here in the province and in a good part of the Netherlands, the internet went down. A lot of people, I think, in the evening without the internet don't know what to do anymore. You just don't. And you get all these web pages of the cable providers where there are lists and lists of complaints. Oh, I have one in mind. Oh, I had a gaming evening planned with my friends, and now I can do it. When can you fix the cable? So the impact of digitalization on today's societies is huge. So I think we should start there. Like, what are the incentives, and do we actually have a choice?
But that's basically an idea about capitalism.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. So tech is a capitalist entrepreneurial venture.
I think that
But
I think
only.
that framing is problematic. But like the way it looks now, it generally most technology is developed from capitalist kind of incentive, and I definitely think that's a problem. But that is not inherent in technology. That is a societal framework where the technology is being developed in. I think that's what it is.
Yeah, technology basically lays like a looking glass on what capitalism can do because it makes it so much larger.
It makes everything more efficient. Like whatever.
It makes capitalism more efficient.
If applied to capitalism, makes capitalism more efficient. No? Or like, but I mean, we are living in a very branded world now since like World War II, and I think that we have to take a step back there. Like we have to look at like what ads do. Like, because I mean, ads are designed to make you feel bad. That's how they work. I went to film school, we studied this. Like, so what happens when we put ads in our basic communication? If I write you a message and there's an ad in between, like, we both feel worse. And like, what does that do to our communication? Like, I think we have to go back there, because it's not, the problem is not of the technology. Like, you could say the same with a hammer. A hammer is efficient at hitting things, no matter if it's a nail or a head. Like, I think that, that.
Yeah, and I think like at the same time it does come from a good place to say it in a way. What I mean by this, now technology and technologies makers are gonna get a lot of hate, and maybe rightly so in many cases, but at the same time, this entire system that we have came out of a very utopic and idealistic idea that was the idea that everybody should have this access that we enjoy so much for free. So everybody in Silicon Valley in the 70s had an extremely positive idea of how this would happen. And I mean, the longer you look back in the history of the internet, it all started completely free without any kind of control, and regulations are only starting to come later after the fact. So the problem there is that at the same time we do live in this capitalistic society, so the only solution for this were ads, right? And ads, like you pointed out, that they're not exactly the nicest thing. They require a certain type of communication which can be very detrimental to your mental health. So I think that we are already changing that in a way. Like I think everybody will acknowledge that now everybody pays more the subscription-based models. Like a few years ago, nobody would pay for movies. Now mostly everybody pays for Netflix, even if one person is paying and 5 others are enjoying it.
4 others, right?
4 others are enjoying its generosity. So I think like the changes are happening already in a way. I think like in a way what we're trying to do is this idea of correct the course a little bit of where this is going and pay a bit more attention.
Do you feel that is mostly superficial? That is mostly about the things that we can really see, like I'm on my phone so much, so Apple makes something that you can see that you're on your phone, but a lot of AI is beneath the surface. So if I apply for a mortgage, for example, a computer might decide whether I get my mortgage or not. So it's less likely that we shine a light on that and actually change that.
So I would agree. I mean, there are a lot of potentially positive impacts of technology, but there are also risks and challenges, and we can start with energy. It was just mentioned. Today the internet is not a problem of artificial intelligence or Bitcoin mining or blockchain alone. All of these emerging technologies, it's a problem, a basic problem of the internet as it is today. It consumes as much energy as the whole aviation sector. So all the planes going around and the internet, so connectivity comes at an environmental price. That's the first thing. So maybe we should start about thinking about that in light of climate change and so forth. And the second part, I would say, is you mentioned regulation. Can we do something about it? And I think literacy here really is the key. it's a democratic question in the end. If we start unpacking black boxes, if we start talking about it, if people get engaged in these questions, I think there would also be a counterbalance to that dominance of developers and so on. Whether they have good interest at heart or commercial interest doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But the algorithms and this does something, and also beyond the surface.
But
This
would
is a
you,
big
I mean,
problem.
you're pretty much into this subject. Would you be able to teach like a 10-year-old kid his 21st century skills concerning this, or is it like too big to explain, too all-encompassing?
Well, if I don't know if you have children.
I do.
Okay, if they're very young, you will have to start earlier than 10 to tell them how to deal with digital gadgets.
Yeah.
Because you don't want a child to look at content that is not appropriate, for instance. So you can do certain safety mechanisms and so on,
Yeah.
but at some point you will have to engage this. So I think it's a gradual process.
Well, that's true, but also concerning that, it's like there's like a waterfall of options that a kid has, and basically a world that he lives in that his own parents are not likely to understand what driving forces are behind it. So I'm getting even more depressed now.
We talked about this in the context of space. Maybe you can say more about our discussion last time about Google Maps and where we got. So.
Oh yeah. Yes, I wanted to say something else.
Sure.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So I think that because you're talking about also now, like, could you explain this to a child? I think that you like there is a certain age group that can actually look at this shift, because there is a shift that's happening that's been happening very strongly since 9/11, but it's actually been happening since World War II, and but it's an age range of people who were grown up enough before the internet,
Yeah.
and who are young enough after the internet,
Yeah.
to be able to actually see that turn.
Yeah.
Because I think that like most people who are now under 20 cannot even comprehend the concept of before the internet. It's like
Yeah.
it's when my grandmother said before the electricity, like I cannot think it.
Yeah.
You know? And I think like my parent generation can also not think about the implementations of this. So I think it's pretty much up to the people who have experienced this shift to analyze it and to try to steer it somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then what?
Yeah, with the Google Maps we talked about it. So if your business, let's say, or your place doesn't exist on Google Maps, it practically doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So whole cities are now shaped by how people navigate digitally.
Yeah.
So if the place is just there, it might be a wonderful bar or whatever it is. If it's not on Google Maps,
It doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist.
And Google decides where it is. Like
Yeah.
I noticed it because I work for a cultural organization, and we have a space in Groningen, it's a soccer terrain, which has been under construction. And we organized an event a couple of weeks ago, and we emailed everyone who participated, like it's here, we send a map, it's like this is the address, here is how you drive to it, and you get it this way. All of the participants Googled it, and they ended up somewhere else. Which is also like, it's very speaking for our time,
Yeah.
that it's, that even if I invite you to come over and I send you like, this is how you get there, this is where it is, you still trust Google over me to in how you get there, and you end up somewhere else. So it's, Google Maps has a very big power, but it's like an anonymous power. It's not even there's not even like a dark entity controlling this power. It's just like a randomly generated
Yeah.
power that is there.
I saw someone posting on Facebook like how annoyed he was when he realized that where he was walking was dictated by Google.
Or how you answer your emails. Do you notice how Google starts to suggest you how you should answer them?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
And I mean, it's quite easy to just say, oh yeah, okay, I will
Yeah.
just type that. And
Yeah,
that's-
but
I
you
can
lose
answer
your
them.
voice basically.
Yeah, you allow then Google to decide how you should answer your email, which is then
Yeah.
a trade-off
it's
for convenience.
It's a
right?
slippery
Yeah.
slope.
But I think that's the optimist part, a very important part that we mustn't forget. That all this AI things, for example, the thing that does this on your email is an AI. In order to
Yeah.
learn, it needs this input. This input is generated by us.
Yeah.
Like the same way in Google, like when you take a picture and you share it, like Google will send you emails, tell you like you're level 2 collaborator in Google Maps. It will give you a little star. It will make you feel very happy, and it will tell you share this with people. So actually, in a way, we forget that we are all creating this in a very powerful way. and that we actually can choose a lot of things. Like there's quite a few map services. We don't even know about them, and of course there's always going to be like go towards everything kind of tends towards a monopoly in this very fast break things kind of mentality and system that we live in. But there are some options, and there's a lot of people working on that, and the tools are very they seem very difficult, but they're available. So there's a lot of people that engage with this, and so I think that's very positive. And then I think that's very important to keep in mind that you are actively choosing and participating in the services you use and how you collaborate with them. That there is a power in that.
We had this example with the European Data Protection Regulation, so the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation for Europe. It started with a few lawyers, and it was not a lot of people who
It was
actually...
like 5 hackers who got about in Amsterdam who got a couple of lawyers to package their observations in a legal.
So if we think about an example like that, very few people's agency in an informed manner can have a huge impact.
Yeah.
And although it's not perfect, it's not now a model for how to deal with digitalization and regulation worldwide.
Yeah.
And if you do business in Europe, if you enter European space, you're bound by it, even if you're in China or in the US and so forth.
Cool. That's a good bridge to enchantment of technology. That's our last of the 3 subjects. We're going to talk about utopia and dystopia. I hope a little more about utopia, please.
Yeah, let's make it utopia.
Yeah. So what kind of new images do we need? I really like the idea of us first thinking the world was the center of it all, and us also thinking our brains are basically the center of it all, and sort of changing that. So that's a little. Did we see the probability of what the computer thought would solve? Like the little number changing, like the probability that he is right.
Yeah, probability that he thinks it's correct.
And he's never seen a television that old.
He
thinks it's a sync.
Yeah, he thought it's a sync, he thought it's a ball at some point. At some point there is like a quick flash of a TV, but in a very low percentage.
Yeah.
But yeah, it has troubles.
And that's sort of very annoying and very comforting. That if you actually notice AI, it's usually when it doesn't work. So if you have your Google Maps telling you need to go somewhere, and you're going somewhere else, and it tries to lead you around the same block, for example, because it can't see what you can see, that there's, I don't know, somebody laying on the street and an ambulance in front of it, for example. That's both a little, gives you a little hope that you still have a role as a human being actually in your own life. But it's also very annoying, of course, because you want it to help.
I think that applies to systems in general, actually. Like, I mean, you only see this framework you live in when it breaks. Like, no matter if it's a technological system or if it's an ideological system. Like, when it doesn't work, it shows it, which it goes back again to what we talked about bias before, and so that it kind of, by systematizing ways of thinking about things and putting them out there, that you actually show the way they are also.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, a positive effect of it.
True. I like this idea of what kind of new images might we need. I think it's a very broad question, so I don't know if you can answer it just like that or you just sort of guide you into it. But this idea of looking at it differently, I mean, I haven't found like a way to go there, but this idea of not looking as the Earth as the center, but the Sun as the center, and not looking at our intelligence as the center, something else is something that sort of guides you along. But do you feel there are images, ideas that can guide us towards having a better relationship with these emerging technologies?
Well, I'm a big fan of science fiction in general because I think it allows for that. Because when you try to do anything that reflects on whatever is going on, it becomes a bit of a loop. Because then that also feeds what's going to happen, and it becomes a loop. And I think that just the act of trying to force your imaginary out of whatever you're used to and try to imagine something different, like I don't remember who said it, but why is it easy to imagine the end of the world than a world outside of capitalism? Like it's a paradox. Like why can't we try to imagine something else on a fundamental level? I think that is important. I think that's the task of every human actually now, to try to imagine what is your utopia. Because like we talked about, we do live in a state which is actually more democratic than anything that's ever been before. Yeah. Even if, no matter how dark it might look.
And safer than ever before.
Yeah. We live longer, we have better tools for doing stuff, and it's like, so we actually have an awesome opportunity to do something. Yeah. If we can only imagine it. Like if we can imagine something, we have a lot of tools for doing it. And I think that is the key here.
So what you were saying about science fiction as well, I feel that like every science fiction movie there is dystopian basically. There's something about it. Sometimes humanity shines through, but a lot of times the technology is the enemy basically. It's very seldomly our friend.
I think actually there's not that much good science fiction movies being made at the moment. There is a lot of good science fiction books being written though, because it's also a question of medium. Because the media of video, it forces us into like representing reality as we recognize it, no? While the medium of literature, it's more free in that way. Yeah. And a lot of like the utopian kind of world representations would be really expensive to realize, I guess, in a movie. Yeah. So I think that's also like a question of medium, and also a question of the bias again, like who chooses what movie gets produced for what reason, what are the things we want to say with it, no? So I think that there is actually a lot of good, like, imaginary being presented that is not dystopia. It doesn't necessarily get produced as Hollywood production.
I would say from a general psychological perspective, dystopia might also not always be bad. Maybe it's healing to confront ourselves with the worst possible case to precisely avoid it, right? But I agree, we need, I think, also utopian images, and I can just talk about maybe it's not exactly images, but at least the silver lining that I see that a lot of people internationally now get together in big consortia and try to work on AI for good. So certain applications that could be really beneficial for humanity, disease analysis, I mentioned it already, urban planning, etc., etc. So you could imagine a lot of very positive things happening. I think what we need is kind of a differentiated approach, but as with all kinds of potentially dangerous things, such as atomic energy or biological agents and so on, there always needs to be kind of an agreement. Internationally, that's difficult at the moment. For instance, banning biological weapons was very successful. Banning atomic weapons, not so much. Yeah. We deal with the consequences of the Cold War and so on. So maybe we should think about certain forms of AI, especially a general learning AI that could be weaponized, and to think about how to regulate that, how to internationally get people together in an alliance to prevent these applications from happening, because at some point if you imagine you design an offensive AI and a defensive AI, because both parties would probably use AI then, they learn from each other. Yeah. We don't know where that goes. So it's certainly good to think about certain types of regulation for certain applications, and I'm quite positive that I see a lot of signs that people are beginning to realize that that is very necessary.
I also feel that this battlefield idea is basically changing. That the idea of like AI weapons is maybe not even as scary as getting political influence through AI. Like we've basically seen with the Cambridge Analytica, which was like a low-level AI kind of thing, with basically big data and a little targeting. But if you really get AI involved, from your couch in China to influence what happens in South America or in the United States or in our country, that is something we don't even see. There's the black box again, basically.
And the other issue is privacy. I mean, a lot of people would argue privacy is basically dead. We don't even need to think about it anymore. It's impossible to maintain it.
We've given it up ourselves. Basically.
We've given it up because when something is free, you're usually the product.
Yeah.
So I think we also deliberately are complicit in this, but I would argue because we have little other choices if we want to participate in society as we know and like it, right?
Yeah.
So there's this kind of conundrum, and we're all enchanted by the technology, to get back to that term, right? It kind of has this magical kind of allure to draw us in.
But do you think that might have a commoning effect on us? Like,
Yeah.
because I mean, it could also create like a common ground where we can actually meet. Then, if we find ourselves in a similar condition, no matter what the condition is, it's actually a way to talk, right?
Or could we sort of not remember anymore what privacy was like?
Maybe.
Do we? Do you? Remember?
I think so. Well, the thing is, people always talk about this idea of, but there's nothing I need to hide, basically. It's, to me, is like the most scary thing if people say that you might not have something to hide individually, which is also debatable, but within a group you definitely have something to hide to other groups.
Yeah, but also it depends on who is the person to hide it from, no?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, we now, I mean, we're fortunate we live in a place where we can say pretty much whatever we want in a public situation, but that hasn't always been the case, and it's not necessarily always the case in the future. Yeah. Like, if, like in a totalitarian regime, just me sitting here saying these things might be something I need to hide, right? So it depends on who is the one that you're hiding it from, and who has what agency to do what with it.
Yeah, and if you can find whatever you've said at any given time later on, then you're not safe right now, basically.
You might have nothing to hide, but you think about it, so it automatically changes your behavior.
Yeah.
And we don't want precisely that, so the argument that I have nothing to hide is not a fit argument. No. Because you still change your behavior once you know you might probably have something to hide, because there's someone who's looking in the first place.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, we do. I mean, otherwise we wouldn't even have gotten dressed for this. Like, if, you know, like we do have, we have a difference between how we are with ourselves and how we are with our intimate group and how we are in society, how we are in the public. Like, no matter how we treat that, there is a difference for everyone. I think there's very few people of us who feel comfortable like taking shit here in the room. You know, like it's.
The fact that you don't know who's watching means that you're sort of at a disadvantage, because if I sit here in front of an audience, I will put on the shirt without the stain in it. But if I don't know that there is an audience, I might go in my entire jogging suit, for example, and might not like what interaction that gives later on.
Yeah. So, but I think this whole hacker aesthetics, this whole kind of subversive use of technology, what you guys do also, how can you get creative with it? I think that is a part of the future, and a large part, like with all technologies, is also fun. It's play.
Yeah.
We like to play, all of us, and computer games are maybe the best manifestation of that. But we all have a lot to discover too.
Yeah.
So I think as many dystopian ideas you could have just as many utopian ideas. I just think they're disproportionately represented in the media and in public. They're less talked about. So I think part of our agency and our literacy is also to bring those into the foreground. And I think you do it to some extent. You just take something, you look at what it does, and then you take it to an extreme. Almost sometimes I have the feeling, as my personal interpretation, almost like a parody sometimes of what it does. To take it to that extreme And once we've gotten the essence of that technology, then we can start thinking about it productively.
Because then what I've seen from the thing you've presented now at Luna, that is what you basically did as well, right? You took the technology to make something positive, to guide the audience towards a utopia.
I wouldn't say that exactly.
I mean, I think that on the long term kind of way, yeah, I think that's the idea. But I think for me, it's a lot about trying to find some commoning aspects, to try to find specifics also, like what is like specifics that I could observe and that I think are important, no matter if they are dark or if they're positive or if they're happy or if they're funny. But like, if it's a specific and I observe it, I think it's part of what I see as my duty to communicate that. No, if I find something, I observe it, I can show it.
Yeah.
And I think that's also what I mean with this, that I think we need some sort of a commoning, general commoning. We need to talk about things. And we need to talk, but we also need to talk in other ways. We need to imagine, we need to kind of build a shared imaginary that we kind of feel comfortable with. And that we're a space where we can meet. Where we have a shared frame of reference. I think that's also a big point of it.
Yeah, and I think like regarding the piece as well, like we were talking earlier of this idea that when you see it, there's like everybody can see a different thing, the way the piece is composed and shown. So everybody can also bring their emotional connections to the locality and their history to the piece, and also regarding of the areas of the installation that it will look at. So in a way, it is exactly about this point that I want to hammer, is about the connection, this kind of affective feeling that one has to something. I feel also like communication becomes better and more fluid when there is this emotional affective connection to what you're doing and what you know about. I think that's very empowering. And I think that like all these tech issues need that in a way. I feel that for all that what we're going to find this tech industries in Silicon Valley are very good at, they're definitely not good at communicating. Like if you see Zuckerberg speaking public, most people start doubting if he's human. And it has this, it needs these nuances, it needs us to bring ourselves to the conversation.
And I think maybe we need a more human technology somehow, because like we are humans, we have human thoughts and feelings and needs and like, I think maybe we need to develop technology also that takes that into account, that allows for these things, that it's, if all technology is supposed to just be efficient and economically like lucrative and so on, that loses a lot of what I feel like it is to be human, you know? And in our communication here and so I think maybe we need to try to imagine technology that allows for the other human aspects, you know, that are not necessarily quick.
It allows us to be more human instead of dehumanize us.
Yeah. I don't know whatever we mean with that, and it's up to us. I think it's up to me and up to you and up to you and up to you to imagine what that means for you.
I think one dystopian scenario is also to imagine that everything is perfect. We just imagine this perfect life where the AI controls our health. You know, if you don't run at that time, you get a message, so it optimizes everything. What kind of world is that? Do we want to live in that? Don't we want to have our imperfections, our vices, our biases sometimes? And isn't that also part of being human? So if we kind of eradicate that through a perfected technology, I think we would have a very different kind of dystopia.
True.
So I'm also sometimes not sure where the tech sector is marching in that regard. Like increased efficiency, perfectibility and so on, is that really our ultimate goal? And then if it is, we should think about how that world would look like.
Yeah.
It would for sure look very sterile, right?
Absolutely. I'd like to take it to the floor. So do you have any questions for our panel? That was a little sudden.
I would like to ask a question about the future of the owner of the data, because what you say about dystopia, when you're not in control anymore, the other one is in power. So if the data of your personality is known to somebody else, you become like some sort of dog to the owner?
Well, you could think about if you go to a supermarket, right? There's a lot of psychology already at play that manipulates you. So we know this from marketing. For instance, more expensive products are usually placed at the height of your eyes, and the less expensive lower, so you need to make an effort to buy them and so on. So we could think about data in the same way. They used to manipulate your behavior in the worst case. In the best case, they used for the benefit of all of humanity, if we think about disease control. So I think it's about who's behind it, and that is a matter of regulation. What are the legal frameworks that kind of regulate the use of data for certain companies?
Also incentive, right?
Yes.
Like, I mean, if the only incentive is to make money, then it will generate a very certain data usage. Like, if maybe we should think of other incentives for using these things.
Yeah, but the power that lies within big data analysis is not to be underestimated, and I think we should also not be naive.
No,
but there is very little that an individual can do, so I think it has to come from a political and regulatory background. But the problem is, most regulators are not experts on algorithm and technology. So politicians, regulators, lawyers, there are very few who are literate in these technologies and who can think about it in that way. I mean, there are people, obviously, there are lots of research institutes, but the public at large, in terms of regulation, ask in The Hague how many people think on a daily basis about artificial intelligence. Probably not so many, and even fewer have, a technical background.
So we need the crisis
one
first
sentence
to
about
manifest.
that. So that usually means that people who have this power of understanding and who have the data go to politicians and they lobby, because they explain to them, so the Google people would go to Brussels and try to influence policy. So this is the game, I think.
And if we bring the idea back of the 70s, like the internet is of everybody, so the data would be from everybody. So not Google is not allowed anymore to collect data without going into the public. Is there any idea about it?
There is a famous, there's a very important media thinker called Jan Lemia, and what he proposes is this idea that you own the data. So actually you would sell your own data. So every time Google utilizes your data in any way, it would, like through a system of micropayments, for example, give you at least some ownership on your data in an economical sense. So there are many people who are thinking about how to deal with this. And for sure, the issue of data being the new oil is definitely true. Like there is definitely a lot of power as we talk about it, but how to give it back to the people, that's a really difficult part.
Because we've already given it away, in a legal sense.
And nobody stole the data, right? We gave it voluntarily. Like, I mean, how many in this room has a free email address? Like almost everybody, I guess, right? So it's not free, you pay with data. Like that's the trade-off, no? Like, in all the apps we use that are free, we pay with data. Because, I mean, somebody has to make some incentive and we live in this economy now. And it's, I mean, there was this idea of the internet as being this very free kind of hippie utopia, but I mean, it is a bit naive to build a hippie utopia on a military technology, like, to me. It seems contradictory. But so I think that is also something that we need to realize, that it's not like Google are stealing our data, but we are actually very voluntarily giving our data to Google, right?
But then the question is, what choice do we have? So this is, even if you have the...
Are we literate enough to understand our own choices?
But yes, that's what I thought that I tried to make before, that I think it's about literacy and it's about communication around these things. And I don't think the question is, should we give our data to Google or not? It's like, how should we use our data should be the question.
Yeah.
And like, how can we talk about that? And how can we then, like, if anyway we're giving all the data to Google, maybe we can also give it somewhere where we can share it. Maybe that's a way to take back control of it also. Like,
open source.
wiki data, like, I don't know.
Yeah, wiki data.
More questions?
Well, we mentioned earlier Google Maps and how we don't have to navigate ourselves anymore. I feel like, for example, with Google Maps, you can also kind of highlight places you like, your favorite restaurant, you find a cafe. It's the same with telephone numbers. You don't have to remember anything anymore for yourself. Do you think it actually changes the way our intelligence works and like our memory works, or do you think it's just an add-on for us?
Well, I think definitely changes the way we work. I don't necessarily think it changes it in a negative or positive way. I think it changes it in a negative and positive way. But I mean, obviously, like, I mean, we have a certain plasticity in the way that our brains function, no? So our brains start to work in the way we use them. So definitely it changes our behavior. There is a book that I can recommend on that topic, actually. It's called Augmented Intelligence Traumas. It's a collection of essays exactly about that. I really recommend it because I think it's really good. But yeah, yes.
Because our sense of smell has gotten worse since we don't need our smell anymore, right? So I mean, you'd imagine the same for our sense of direction.
Yeah, of course. If we don't use our sense of direction, then we will deteriorate. That's how evolution works. That's how our brain works.
Dystopian again.
Well, not only dystopian, because we also we are way better now at processing large amounts of information than we used to be. So it's like it's always both. It's not necessarily better or worse. It's just different and more. It's constantly more.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Cool. Any more questions?
Do you guys think there might be like a limit to like how far the technology will be advanced, and not because we as humans will not be able to advance it any further, but because there will become a growing number of people who say, okay, we need to stop now in order to stay human in a way, or because they feel like there's also like quite some disadvantages to some forms of technology.
I think that becomes it's a very difficult question, but also I think we need to consider then if you would want to stop it, how would you stop it? Like we wouldn't stop it. Like if we would want to stop it, can we even stop it? Like it's become a condition of our reality. Like it's hard to stop a condition of reality that is so all-encompassing, right?
So we are technological animals, right? And I mentioned before that rule of if it can be done, it will be done by someone somewhere. So it's very hard to, even if you regulate or give laws or have political control over this, you always need to think globally, right? Like with the proliferation, for instance, of atomic weapons. What's with the proliferation of military AI? If countries get together, and especially the superpowers that are now in AI arms race, like the US and China, for instance, and both of them are good at some aspects of AI, but it's not clear who won that race yet. I think it's important to get on that international level a kind of agreement. That's very hard, but that doesn't exclude the risk of a rogue actor just doing something, you know? So I think it's prospects to regulate are rather bleak on that level, I would say.
Yeah, I think it's a really good and difficult question, as I said. Like I think about it a lot as well. It's very difficult to have an idea. When I think about it, I usually look at two things. On one hand, you have the very famous Moore law that you might have heard of, which is this idea that a transistor in a chip goes half the size or double the speed, and it potentially accelerates. So everything becomes better and faster at an alarming rate. And there are, ever since the 80s, I think, that when this started, it has kept on exponentially accelerating. It is, in a way, the law that has given all this tech its current state. But at the same time, when you were talking about AI, you mentioned very quickly that it's been in development for a long time, and there's this thing called an AI winter. So research went very quickly when the first theoretical ideas started in the 50s, and then it died off. And then a new technology came about that allowed it to speed up again. But then it also disappeared and went a bit out again of the consciousness, of the general consciousness of people. And now it's again back in full force thanks to other technological developments. So it's this kind of very difficult to kind of think where it goes and if it can keep going and which factors will come into play. But we can definitely look back at history and see that it changes in different ways. And that what it seems to me matters the most is how much the collective kind of understanding and focus is on this technology. The more we think about certain things and people collaborate in building them, the stronger they become.
So I think there's.
I also think there's not one AI. It's a mix of very complex, interconnected, different technologies that have very many layers. So if you talk about this, it's also the question, where do we start? With which technology? Because are you talking about robotics? Are you talking about machine and deep learning? Are you talking about image recognition, voice recognition, neural networks, all these things, you know?
It's also too wide to even regulate, basically, to regulate all of it.
Precisely, and some of the applications might be really, really specialized and really, really beneficial.
Yeah.
Right? So if we regulate it, we might regulate it out of existence, and then we miss all the opportunities. We also don't want that, maybe.
Yeah. One last question, or are we going to hit the bar? I think we're going to hit the bar. Karsten, Hannes, and Agustín, thank you very much for your insights, and you, of course, for being here. Have a good evening.
Thank you.